Hello, Kennedale. It's Jeff Nevarez with Kennedale News, and I'm here with another video edition, our special edition for the campaign 2020 local election. And today I have the mayoral candidates, and we'll get to that in a moment. But for now, our sponsor. We wouldn't be able to do this without the Kennedale Rotary Club. They allowed us the use of their Zoom, which gives us a lot more time than 45 minutes. And I just want to give them a good shout out. They are a local community. They help out with the schools and anybody within the community, and it's also a global initiative. But one of their biggest fundraisers is the Kennedale Rotary Club. Let me pull this up. Is their flag program. I'm sure you guys see it 6 times a year. And this little fundraiser right here, $50 gets you where we bring out an American flag on these holidays right here: Memorial Day, Flag Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Patriots Day, and Veterans Day, which also includes 9/11, by the way. And for that $50 a year, that actually goes to Kennedale students. We do a yearly debate in January where students argue for the four-way test, which is a compass for the Rotary Club. The students are the ones that actually put out the flags, and they do it as a fundraiser for their prom. So your $50 goes for the whole year. You can pay now. Go to the KennedaleRotaryClub.com website and click on this link right there, and you can sign up for next year. And we hope to see a lot more flags than we have in previous years. All right, today I have the privilege to have the mayoral race here. Now, I have Mayor Brian Johnson here, and as you can see, we don't have Mr. Drayden. I've reached out to his campaign, and I have not got a response, so I'm just going to go ahead and move forward with interviewing Brian Johnson, our mayor for Kennedale. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing fine. Nice and cozy here. I just got through painting this room.
And you're in Oklahoma right now?
No, I'm in New York visiting my mother.
Oh, you're in New York. Well,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Make sure you take a bath before you come back, okay?
Well, I'll tell you, the leaves are a pretty color. I'm up here helping out my mom.
So you must be in North New York then.
Yeah, I'm in just about 40 miles south of Syracuse, New York.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a beautiful part of the state, but that's only 5% of the population, so nobody really pays attention to that part of the state.
It's empty, and I have a nice view of a little small town that has a little steeple in it. It's very you can see why people like to paint this area. This used to be known as the Hudson School of Painting, where you paint these landscapes. It came out of this area. I can see why now.
Well, I won't have to go over the rules this time because there's only just you and I, so I just get the privilege of grilling you for the next hour. And we'll go over a few things, but it's the mayor's race this year. You do it every other year. It's you and Mr. Drayden. Election 2020 has just been a crazy year, so everybody is voting on November from you all the way up to the president. And so it's a big deal this year. So let's just go over a couple of things, and we'll see if we can get your message out to the masses.
Okay.
All right, so let's start with the current state of the union. Since you're the incumbent, who knows better than how Kennedale is doing right at this moment?
Well, right now, I mean, it's tough, just like it is with a lot of cities with the COVID crisis. We got about $450,000 from the federal government for what we call CARES money, and we've been using that to help pay officer overtime and paramedics overtime because of COVID. We've also used to buy hotspots for the Kennedale ISD for those kids that didn't have internet access, and still have hotspots available for people who may have lost their job and haven't been able to get back to work. Now they can get internet at home for free. And so that's been tough. And we just went through a really tough budget cycle. As you know, it was covered pretty heavily, even in the Star Telegram and in your newspaper. We had a budget shortfall. And again, I will tell you the reason is that 2 years ago, the council approved a budget that increased spending by $500,000 roughly. And then cut the tax rate, reducing the amount of revenue coming in by about $380,000. Well, I just think that you just can't do that. That's something the federal government does, is that they spend more money than they get, and we need to be more prudent in our spending. So unfortunately, we did raise taxes this year. And the school district ended up lowering it, so the impact is a little bit less on residents. But I think the next few years is just going to be years of really tight budgets, not doing a whole lot. and hoping that we get some more growth coming in here and grow our way out of this problem and return our fund balance to where it needs to be. Unlike the federal government, which deficit spends like crazy, in city government, we like to keep a 25% reserve. And that 25% reserve is in case you have an emergency. If a tornado came through or something, we'd have at least a 3-month period that we could operate on that reserve, just like the state of Texas operates its rainy day fund, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somehow the state and local government operates better than the federal government. And so, well, we had to dip down to our reserves because we had promised first responders raises, and other people raises, but at the same time cutting the tax rate. And so, we've had 2 finance directors who said that was a bad idea. And so now we're just trying to recover from that. And I'm not looking to put blame in the past. It's just what it is right now. We've got to solve the problem now and get our reserves back to where they need to be. And I think we can do that within 3 to 4 years if we keep a tight budget.
And I completely agree with you. It's kind of hard to beat on people in the past what they do. It doesn't solve the problem now.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot on Facebook of hammering, city managers from a decade ago. Just mind-boggling. That was a decade ago. A lot's happened. Now, I just want to recap what you had just kind of said, because I was there for that meeting. And out of a decade of sitting through these city council meetings, it's the one that always sticks out to me in my memory the most, which was the city council 2 years ago, to put it in layman's terms, said we're going to have a budget at X amount, and then to fund that budget, they dropped that tax rate down, which didn't fund that budget. And so instead of it being fulfilled, they were pulling from their savings, to put it in layman's terms. And so that's what we've been doing for the last couple of years, is just kind of balancing it up with savings, and we've now driven our fund balance down. But the problem with that too, and our biggest probably issue, is not only are our lines going down and not up, and I think we can agree on that one, but for us to get bonds and to get loan money to do projects, this could hurt us. Is that correct?
Yes, and when the bond rating people came in and looked and saw what had happened 2 years ago, they were concerned, put us on a credit watch, and we came up with a plan so that we could maintain our AA- rating, which is a high rating for a local government.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we lose that rating, and then we have to go out and bond things, and you bond to build street projects, water and sewer lines, parks, you bond to do that. And if your bond rating goes down, then you're going to pay more in interest. And it's a good point to make when we talk about bonds. Cities really operate in 2 types of bonds. One is a certificate of obligation. This is one that is required for the needs of the city. You don't go to the voters for this one, because if you go to the voters and they say no, then you can't fix that need for 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So if you have to go bond out to fix a sewer line, then you use a certificate of obligation. General obligation bonds, the other type, are the ones you want to go to citizens with.
Sure.
Because these are for things that you want, right? You want to expand your park system. You want to build a library. You want to build a new fire police station. Then let the voters come out and say, okay, these are wants. These aren't necessarily pressing needs. Do we want this? And do we want to pay the additional cost for it?
I always liked your explanation of this, because it really comes down to very simple. Our expectations as citizens versus our city government, whatever you need to get done, get it done, do the smaller bond. But our wants, when we want a better baseball field, for example, the Parks Board was working on that for a year. That's a want. We should put it to the people, because it's above and beyond the expectations of roads and sewer lines and whatever else needs to be fixed around the city.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of saying it. Whatever is above the expectations, then you go to the citizens. But when you have to fix a road or a water pipe, and these things are expensive, then you just have to go do it.
Well, since we're on the topic, you said 3 years you expected us to be out this, but I think, and I know you can agree, you and I have been working on this for a long time, is how can we get the local economy going, so that way we could take some of the burden off of the property owners. But I think the misconception is that some people think that the government needs to go in and go call Coca-Cola and say, hey, you need to open up shop here, or McDonald's, please move here. And that's not really the role of the city government. What's your thoughts on local economics?
Well, I think that, there's been plenty of studies that show that, a lot of times when you give, tax breaks to companies, that's not going to attract that many companies, because they're going to get that offer anyway. What really attracts people is that, do you have a quality of life? Do you have the amenities? right? And I don't see the reason why we'd be giving, like the state did, $40 million to Toyota to come here. It doesn't make sense to me. Our role really is to make sure that we have a good, solid infrastructure, that the rules for a business are clear, that they understand what the rules are going to be. And then, of course, as you know, well as anybody, is that you got to have rooftops. And I think it was almost 15, 16 years ago, we did a study by the Buxton Group, and Josh Altum, councilman, he had suggested we do a study of the Buxton Group. And I mentioned we'd done this before. What the Buxton Group found out was that when it came to attracting retail businesses, we were good in terms of housing east of 287. But when you went west of 287, Kennedale Parkway, that is, there was not much out there. And so that wasn't generating within that radius enough rooftops for the people to bring in a business here. We just can't say, come here, right? People say, why don't we have a grocery store? Well, because you don't have the rooftops, you don't have the traffic to do it.
Sure.
So that means you need to be a little bit creative in terms of getting those rooftops in here and getting in more housing. You cannot bring in retail without new housing. And so if you're going to vote no on any new housing because you've got your house and you want everything else to stay as it always has, you're not going to get retail. And it's going to be difficult for us to get us a grocery store anyway, because as you know, right on our borders, we have an Aldi's, we have a Walmart, we have a Kroger, and we have an Albertsons.
Yeah, nipping at our heels.
Nipping at our heels. And that's very tough for us to get it, for a business to say, hey, we want to come in and compete with those grocery stores. So I do think that the other problem we have is that we don't have the big green spaces that you would have seen down in Burleson or Mansfield, where they had these empty lots of land along a busy road that they could drop in a big box retailer. A lot of our land is already occupied by businesses, whether that would be, a car wash, auto repair, salvage yards, and those people have property rights, right? And they're existing businesses. So what you really like to see is some businesses that would bring in a higher sales tax revenue. We are deficient in sales tax revenue. We need more of that. And that's been something that the city has struggled to bring in for 20 or 30 years. Maybe that'll change a little bit more when they redo 287, 820, I-20 interchange, which is set to begin construction in 2021 and finished by 2026.
$4 billion, right? Am I right?
Only 1.5 billion now.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but no toll lanes, so that's good.
Yay!
And for a long time in Kennedale, the biggest sales tax producers were the sexually oriented businesses.
They had the biggest point of sale.
Right, and of course they also brought in crime. They also brought in lower property values. They're gone. That we finally got rid of them in 2012, and so we've now generated some revenue up there, and we're hoping to get a hotel in there, and then maybe some sit-down restaurants. So I think that's the goal of business of the local government, is try to make it as business friendly as you can to get people in here. Business friendly, however, doesn't mean that you just do whatever an existing business says. Look, I don't want to obey your rules, and then you say, well, I'm sorry, the citizens made these rules, and then they say, well, you're not being business friendly. Those are two different things. But I tell you that what businesses want is they want consistency. They want to know what the rules are, and they don't want the rules to change on them.
Yeah, I mean, as an entrepreneur myself, and as somebody who literally is an ambassador to other businesses, when businesses call me and just want to know the pulse of the area, are we growing? How's the city? And I get calls all the time. I've escorted developers around the town, and I think that what people don't realize is that it takes an investment. Where there's a risk assessment. Even when I bought Kennedale News, I had to assess the risk and reward. Well, is there a profit margin there? What can I do? Can I make a profit margin, even if there's nothing there in the beginning? And these are the things as business owners we do, because it's our money that we're rolling into this.
Right.
So you brought up the grocery store, and I've seen comments about it, and my comment is start one. Like, what are you waiting for? Like, business is done by people like you and I. Go take the risk, roll the dice, just like the rest of us did. And you're going to fail sometimes. You're going to be rewarded sometimes. But that's business. And in my opinion, the government just needs to get out of the way of business. So for me, if the city can, like you said, make the rules very clear and just be out of the way, otherwise that fosters a good place to do new businesses.
That's what we've had that comment. Business say, hey, look, we don't care what your rules are. but make sure that you don't change them on us and you're consistent with them. And if you were running a business, you want to start a business in Kennedale, a retail business, you would look at rooftops, right? What's the
Mhm.
traffic going through there?
Sure.
What's the medium income, right? What's a disposable income of a particular kind of business, right? Because if you're Trader Joe's, you're going to look for some place that has a large disposable income, right? So these are all different factors, and there's a limit on what the city can do in terms of doing it. But cities are always trying to attract businesses in. They're
Oh
always
yeah.
trying to do it.
Yeah, everybody is. Do you think that we're attractive? Like we by you just listing those couple things, we kind of check off on the median income's like 75,000, and we'll know better by next year on the census, but it's roughly 75,000. We're projected to grow. I think it was like 18% or over the next 10 years. So that does it look attractive? Do you think?
Well, it's tough to say because, if you go back to the 1965 master plan, which is now, what is that, 55 years ago, they expected us to be at 35,000 at this time.
Woo, and 6 square
They're a
miles.
little bit off. So demographic projections are always difficult
Sure.
to take stock in, but we are located in a very well spot. I think a lot of people like where we're located, that we're on this, where you can get to Fort Worth pretty quickly. You can get to the airport real quickly. You can get to Dallas very quickly. You can get wherever you want to go pretty fast. And I think that's only going to get better with the new interchange that'll come along. So I think what we could be doing is upgrading our park system, and really sort of cleaning up some of the areas we have. I mean, I
Yeah.
think a couple things that I'd like to see, and this, are soccer fields.
Mhm.
A dog park would be nice. Expanding our linear trail system.
The dog part was on my list for you. I was championing that for you.
I love dog parks because I have two dogs, and I'd like to see a dog park. And you think a dog park's real easy, right? You just build a fence-in
It's
area.
not.
It's not. Apparently,
It's not.
it's
Very
difficult.
expensive, which
It's
is
very.
why the Parks Board decided to go against it. Because I wanted to take, was it the one by the high school, and kind of take half of that and make that a dog park. But again, like you said, even transforming an area and just the cleanup and maintenance is pretty expensive.
Yeah, see, I think that's where a lot of us, when you talk about government, it's almost like you hear the story about, I saw some street workers and they were just standing around when you drove by at 60 miles an hour because you only caught a glimpse, right? You're only catching that one frame, not knowing all the other parts of it that was going on before and after. And so when you talk about parks, and you've been active in parks for a long time and art in the park and all this sort of stuff, it's got a longer history than somebody just coming by and taking a quick look at it.
Yep.
There's a lot of work in the background that people miss.
Blood, sweat, and tears for sure.
Right. And so I think it's easy to say that sometimes, well, why they make that decision. There's always a lot of thought going back into that decision, whether you agree with it or not. But these were people back in the 90s and the early 2000s that were thinking through these processes and listening to the evidence they had. It wasn't because they just were, idiots. They're not. They were thinking it through.
Would you say that part of the issue of our finances and how we've kind of increased the taxes over the last decade is just kind of cost of living in general has gone up? Just if we want to fix a street now, it was a lot cheaper 10 years ago.
Yeah, I do think that it was one of the issues when the legislature uh, had Senate Bill 2 last session, trying to
Which you
limit.
spoke for, by the way. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
against, but yeah.
No, actually, I spoke
For. Yeah.
for. I understood that they had to do something about property taxes. I understood that, but my only concern was that they wanted to fix it to the consumer price index of how much you could actually go up. Well, that's great, but our health insurance costs often outpace the consumer price index, as anybody can tell you with health insurance.
Yes.
And construction costs outpace the consumer price index. And so both of those were concerns of mine, but I understand why the legislature wanted to do something. So I did go down and speak in a very friendly way about, those were my two concerns about the bill.
And I think my biggest concern is, and I've been saying this for years, and I was actually excited when 2 years ago when council had approved increases in pay for staff, was our biggest bill is employees always.
Yep.
The cost that's usually 50 to 60% of any business or any corporation. It's usually the majority of what you spend. And then our workers are literally working for pennies compared to what they would be working in competitive cities of our similar side in the DFW Metroplex. And that includes paramedics and includes our staff that works at the city hall. And so to increase, we need to kind of bring them up to speed and make it worth their while. Otherwise, we won't have a quality worker either.
That's right. I think that, going back to 2 years, I think it was a good idea to try to raise our employees at least to 80% of market value. And this, that the vast number of our employees are police and fire, first responders. We don't have a lot of people at City Hall, and many of them wear a lot of different hats, but the vast majority of our pay and our budget, fire. And so when you say just cut the budget, that's irrevocably going to mean police and fire. And I don't think anybody's for that.
I mean, we need more than what we have.
Right? Yes, last year our chief of police, Tommy Williams, asked for three new police officers, and we gave him one. He's running shorthanded. Yep. And that not only puts our police in danger, but it puts residents in danger if the police is shorthanded.
And I was trying to explain to some of the residents on one of the board meetings, like the way that was explained to us at Rotary is like, let's say on a Sunday night, there's only 2 on shift.
Right.
It takes 2 to do an accident. So if you have a DWI accident, there's 2 right there. And then you have an emergency. What are you going to do? Well, Arlington does back us up, but there's that delay. And on the flip side of that, what if one was making a DWI arrest and was in Mansfield? And then there was an accident. What are we supposed to do? And I've actually seen a Kennedale police officer racing back down 287 on the Mansfield side. And that was actually even shortly after that was explained to me. And I knew in my heart that's what they were doing, was trying to get back to help.
And if you limit that, we do have interlocal agreements with Arlington, Mansfield, and others, but that takes time.
It takes time. And
that time could be the difference maker.
Absolutely. All right, let's see what we else. We kind of went down a little hole there.
It was fun though.
Let's go back to you're running an election. Give us your experience. I know the majority of what you do, but why don't you tell everybody else what your experience, your background?
Well, as you know, I teach for Tarrant County College. I'm a political science historian. I'm the chair of the department, have been for about 8 years now. I got involved in city government way back in 1998. I got appointed to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And this was before we even had a city hall. And then in 2000, I was made the chairman of the P&Z, and we had the new building. And then in 2005, we had a council member who had to resign, and they needed to appoint somebody, and somehow my name got brought up. And since then, I've been on city council. I've been mayor for 6 years, but yep. I think people don't understand that really there's a lot more to it for the mayor's job. I served on the National League of Cities Youth Education and Families Council, the National League of Cities Transportation and Infrastructure Advisory Committee, their Community Block Grant Committee. I've served on the Texas Municipal League Legislative Committee. I'm a TML Vice President. I serve on the Tarrant Regional Transportation Coalition. I was just the president of that, and I stepped off. Now I'm just a part of the executive board. I'm also a member of the 911 executive board that runs the 911 district. I served on the Homeless Coalition board, and I served on the Southeast Transportation Partnership Board. And all of these things are designed really to give Kennedale a voice. I think people know who Kennedale is. They know when I go in the room that I've got experience and that we are well represented, I think. It's fortunate for me because my job as a teacher allows me to do a lot of these different things that maybe somebody like past Mayor John Clark, who's a lawyer who was there doing his law job full time. I have the opportunity to do it, and it does mean I do have to travel. Sometimes I've traveled to DC to meet with Ron Wright or Joe Barton and other conferences. Trust me, it's not fun. I think my Mayor Pro Tem Sandra Lee went with us once in Washington, and she says, there's just no time because you're just going from one place to another. And next thing you know, you're back in coach, you're heading back home after you've gotten your stuff done. So there's a lot of research. And then, of course, there's just it's constant training. You have to read books on governance. You've got to read books on urban design. There's just a lot to it, and it's fun to learn. If you're the kind of person that wants to learn, you can. And anybody, trust me, anybody can serve on council and be good at it. It just your first year or so, your best off is listening and getting as much training. But if you have a passion for it and you're willing to get out and learn the information, you can be very effective. And we've seen a lot of effective council members that get out there and try to learn what the job is and what their role is. That's the tough part on council is that citizens have problems and you want to be able to solve every one of their problems, but that may not be within your purview or the government's purview to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's as for a council member, that just reflects that they're really trying to help, but they're limited on what they can and cannot do because you have to act as a council as a whole. And there are some areas where the government shouldn't be involved in. If it's a dispute between neighbors, a lot of times that's not our bailiwick. And
sure.
of course, we have to cooperate with other governments. I think sometimes people will call me and say, well, do something about the school district. I go, it's a separate government. They have their own elected board. They have their own version of a city manager.
They have their own budget.
County, right?
Their own taxes too.
Yeah, they have their own taxes. I mean, people don't understand that when I talk about this in government and federalism, that you probably live under at least 10 governments that can tax you or regulate you in some sort of way.
Sure. And that's a lot of cooks in the kitchens.
That is a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And I remember one of the big things I remember I used to use in my classes is trying to build the bridge over on Bowman Springs Road. That bridge was in the works for a decade or more. Mm-hmm. Because to build the bridge required the cooperation of at least 5 governments, the county, which owned the area in between the bridge. One side of the bridge was owned by Arlington, the other side of the bridge was owned by Kennedale. And so they had to put in money. And then, of course, you were getting money from the state, and they had regulations. And you were getting money from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and they had regulations. So how many governments does it take to build a bridge? It took 5. And it took 15 years to build a bridge.
Yeah. And I always tell this to people who try to, because I'm against putting limitations on elected officials in assembly. I'm all for presidents and governors and all that stuff, but in assembly, it just takes so long to do anything. It took us a year to even discuss in the Parks Board, because we meet once a month for an hour, a bond package for the citizens to upgrade the parks. It took a year. And then if we put it in the bond package, it's like COVID this year, so maybe next year we'll do it. So that's 3 years. If they vote for it, then we have to get the money. That's another year. And then the construction, we're talking about 5-6 years since induction. So why would you want to limit your city council, Arlington, for a 3-year terms or 2-year terms in our case? You'll get nothing done. There's no living memory there. Like, how's the next person or the next person of that supposed to know what we were doing 6 years ago?
Yeah, I think it takes at least 2 years before you start really getting your feet wet and getting a clue on it. But you hit a note there too, is that you cannot, as the Parks Board, get together and meet. Say, hey, we don't have an official meeting, but let's go meet at Denny's and talk about this.
Yeah.
That's a violation of the law.
It is.
And so, yeah, you have to meet once a month, and those have to be public meetings. And so government tends to move a little bit slow. I remember with the sexually oriented businesses, I was representing the city when we met with the owner of Showtime, and we struck a deal saying, why don't you close it in 5 years? Originally, I think the man at the time wanted 3, he wanted 8. I said, how about 5 years? Because 5 years, Jeff, in city government is no time at all.
None.
Because it takes you at least 5 years to start planning what you want to do next and getting it all into work. It's a slow moving process, and it can be frustrating.
I think it's a little bit more frustrating for Kennedale leadership too. So I just brought up Arlington. Let's make a comparison. City council is paid there, mayor's paid there. Here in Kennedale, we're all paid $1. Everybody who's your leadership locally, even yourself, it's paid $1. And in comparison, the mayor of Arlington gets a vote. It's called a strong mayor, and you don't get a vote. It's called a weak mayor. So since you're a poli-sci guy, why don't you kind of explain the difference? Because I see comments all the time in our Facebook things of people, I don't think they understand what goes on.
Yeah, Arlington and Kennedale and Burleson all operate on in what we call the city manager uh, council plan, where you have an elected city council, which acts as your legislative body, and then you hire a professional city manager to run the day-to-day business. Now, the idea is that as a council member, you don't get involved in the day-to-day running of the city. That's why you hired the manager. The manager's job is not to be involved in the local politics. Now, it depends on how you do it, depending on how many council members you have. Uh, Burleson, the mayor gets the vote. Over in Arlington, Jeff gets the vote. The way we set it up, I don't get to vote because we have 6 members. And so I only get to vote if there's a tie, which is rare. But yeah, I think, you get paid $1, but you don't get into, like, you're on Parks Board, you don't get into this because you want to make money. No. You probably end up spending more of your own money than you.
I put on a concert. I mean,
that's right. You put on a concert. You put in money for Art in the Park. I mean, you end up spending more of your own money, but you don't do it because you're looking for money. You do it because you want to make the community better. Sure. And that, I will say this again and again, even to people that have been on council and I've disputed with, they all got into it, I believe, for the right reasons. I've always believed that. Even though I think they might have been completely wrong, I still think they got into it for the right reasons.
Yeah, or as you say, you just volunteered. I told you.
That's right.
I use that all the time in Rotary. Oh, you spoke up? You just volunteered, according to Brian.
That's right, because if you speak up at a meeting, I'll usually put you on a board.
Absolutely. So you were just kind of summing up your experience, and you're the only other person I know that has a bigger resume than myself. But a lot of those have to do with some of the things that we're getting around here. For example, you helped get the interchange and work that out over here on Kennedale. So what, explain a little bit on that, but what are some of your other accomplishments that you've done in your tenure?
Well, a lot of it is, when I first got on here, we only had one park, Sonora Park, and it wasn't in great shape. Fortunately, we got grant money to help renew Sonora Park, redo it completely. We've added another park, of course, Rolling Acres Park, or Rogers Farm Park, sorry, Lori Sanders. We've added that park, and we added a town center park. And it wasn't, it wasn't me, it was the council in general. I remember working with David Green. Former council member, now P&Z member, was just a really big parks guy. And I remember sitting around talking with him, and we were looking at that empty field in town center and said, why can't we have a park here? And so the council as a whole worked to build that park. And I think what you do as a council member is you try to build a consensus to get the park done. So yeah, I think building the parks has been a big help. The new road projects like Sublet, Little Road, and Bowman Springs.
Needs it so bad. That bridge over there. Sublet needs it so bad.
Well, the ones that we did beforehand with the 2006 bond package, and I remember everybody hating the roundabouts, but they don't seem to hate them as much anymore. It has eliminated a lot of the traffic. It's safer. And I remember people telling us that we'd let the medians die, but they haven't died. They still exist. And then, of course, we also did the town center, which, we're still hoping will take off. We've got some occupancy. We need more. And I think that'll increase once we get more housing units down New Hope Road and drive them into the town center. That required a special bill of the legislature. And I went down and testified in front of committee on that bill. But it's usually as a council as a whole. So for example, we now record all our meetings. I think it's a great idea. And this council of Mayor Pro Tem Lee and Chad Wandell, Linda Rhodes, Chris Pugh, Josh Altum all agreed that was a good idea. So it's always going to be that sort of a group effort to get anything done, because it has to be a group effort. I think this is where Washington makes a mistake, is that when it's just one side and they're forcing it on something through, it doesn't last. Unless there's a consensus, then it can last.
I actually quoted you yesterday when I did the interview with Bailey and Daryl, and the quote was, I just lost it. Hold on. Not volunteer. What were you just talking about?
I was talking about building a consensus and getting buy-in.
Now it escapes me. It's a quote that you use often too, like your voluntold quote. Oh, transparency. That's what we're talking about. That I think you're very transparency, and I'm quoting you, but we can always do more. And
Yeah.
I quoted you yesterday. You say that often, that government should always be transparent, but there's always something you can do better. Which, like you said, get the video equipment.
Well, I think, I've been pushing so far. We haven't been successful yet, but I'm still pushing. There's software that you can put out there where you put it on your web page, and it puts your check register out there. Let everybody see every check that you're going to do.
Sure.
It also shows you any project that's being made. You can click on it, and then when you have that project, it shows you how much the project's going to cost, where the funding's coming from. You can't. I just don't think that you can never be too transparent. And I think the city, in the long run, has done a better job than most, in that we publish our entire packet, that you see what we see. You can subscribe to all the packets and see what we see. And I think the missing component of that was, getting the videos so people could hear us and watch us. And then I still think I'd like to get that software that would allow people to see where all the money's going. Anytime you wanted to know where the money was going, you could be able to click on it. Like I said, why wouldn't you do that?
A different world we live in now. We can do it now. So
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we should. And so, I know there's a cost factor to it. But then I think there's a cost factor for not having it either. It's not a monetary cost, but there's a cost to it.
So one of the things that you missed on your points that you think you're a good accomplishment, that I think is a great accomplishment for you, is you show up to all the meetings to the North Texas City Council of Governments, which gives
it's the Mayor's Council.
The Mayor's Council, yeah. Which, because you show up to every time, or even have one of us or the City Council show up if you can't make it, because we show up to all these, we actually get like $110,000 grant.
I think we got 165
Nice.
This last time, and then we got 150 the time before. Yeah, you get money for doing that, just for showing up. It takes you Monday night. Fortunately, we've been doing that by Zoom lately, and I am the past chair of that, and I actually serve on the board that determines who gets the grant money usually. So I want to make sure that Kennedale's voice is recognized, and these are CDBG grant monies. That's a community block development grants, and they have to be used for areas that are older areas that may be considered blighted, and so they're used to repair water and sewer lines. They help us out,
which is a program that we have in the city.
It's a program that we have in the city, and they're expanding it a little bit more, for street lighting, and maybe what we've been pushing now in the Mayor's Council is better broadband access. And you know this as well in your field. The United States doesn't do as well as it should in terms of broadband for everybody. Mm-hmm. And we need to do a better job.
Yeah, I think last time I checked we were 27th, but I think we even fell down a little bit from that since.
Which is amazing, since we're the most technologically advanced country in the world, and yet we're number 27, and we can do better.
Yeah, for sure. But moreover, by you going to these things, I think that's what is more important. It's a lesson that I had to learn hard in life. It's not necessarily what you know, but it's who you know. Because you're participating, you're making relationships with these other city governments. And so things like, hey, the county wants to come in and put a new road. We'll pay 80, you guys pay 20. That's the kind of relationships and the benefits that we get from that.
It helps. I mean, I think that, although it doesn't directly, it's not in Kennedale, I think Sublet Road there by Steeplechase, where you've got that bend, I was at the meeting where they decided what we're going to do, this road or we're going to do another road. Well, I was there, nobody else was there, and I said, Kennedale needs that money, or at least Arlington does, to build the road that benefits Kennedale. And the county chipped in $2 million just to get the engineering done on that road. It's 700 feet of road, but it's almost a $10 million project. And that $2 million gave the kickstart, and Arlington's looking at fall 2021 to fix Sublet Road. So we no longer have that bend, and we'll have sidewalks in there.
Pretty dangerous bend too.
Shout out to school district. They were helpful in getting the right-of-way done. So it takes all the different governments to get it done. So there we're talking about the school district, Kennedale, the city of Arlington, and the county.
Okay. All right. So how about some tough questions now? I'm sure the average person is like, those weren't tough. But how about some tough questions? How about let's move to water. It's been a long going process with water over the last decade. Where are we at currently before I hammer you on the billing? Where are we at with the getting Arlington water in our mixture and the billing and things like that?
Well, first off, we were getting to the point, and I'm going into a little bit of a history, where the well water was not enough to get us through. The wells could pump 1.75 million gallons a day,
Mm.
and we were using in peak capacity in the summer 2.25, and we'd fallen behind from decades of neglect on our water infrastructure. Well,
That
being a
in state of Texas restricts any new wells as well.
that's right, state of Texas isn't going to let you. They're fearful of the aquifer. Um, Well, for a small city, you've got an economy of scale. So we knew we have, for example, a water tower that needs to be repaired, and that's $800,000. Well, you've got 2,000 water customers. What does that mean? And so it meant that our water rates were going to go pretty high, and they did. They went high, and of course, the voters didn't like that, and they voted people out of office as that's the risk you take in politics. Um, But what really helped us get our water rates back into a more reasonable area was the work of George Campbell and his connections in Arlington. So that what we did was, since we don't have the ability really financially to do what we need to do with our water system, is to buy water from Arlington and let them operate our system. I think that one of the things that we needed was a vacuum truck, which helps clean out sewer lines. Well, a vacuum truck is $500,000 plus the operator.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now by just having Arlington as a maintenance agreement to our water system, they've got the vacuum trucks, they've got the operators, and they have the indoor engineers to help us engineer new projects within the city. So we are in the process now, and we should be ready to go within, and I had talked to George about this recently. We've taken some Arlington water when we ran short, but we are going to be looking at going full bore into Arlington water in probably about 3 to 4 months. And right now we're getting most of our water from Fort Worth. So it's all surface water, but we're getting not so much well water.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is that when we look at billing, we decided back, gosh, it was way back. It was during when John Clark was mayor. We probably jumped ahead of ourselves in terms of the technology. And we went with Fathom. Fathom was going to be a new way of really being able to track water, because a lot of people aren't even on the water system or getting water. It was going to be a more accurate way. And then Fathom went out of business. And so the Fathom boat, if you go back and you read the research and you read the minutes, you go, okay, I can see why they would do it. It ended up not working well. And by the way, I voted for it. Mea culpa right there.
I don't blame you. I hated Fathom.
But it's me. I was one of them. And so when we had to shift, we went over to muni billing temporarily because the water meters were not being able to be read by Arlington. Well, muni billing was a wreck. We had several actually made the news. Some people were getting a $2 million water bill, which I'm pretty sure they're not using that much water. And we corrected those. And so what we decided to do was that we're going to change out all the meters, which we've been doing, and Arlington been getting that done. But we still have some muni billing. And once that muni billing is gone, we should have all the billing issues solved. I mean, we won't have these $2 million water bills that were rare. I think we had maybe 20 cases, 30 cases out of 2,000 water customers. But when you get a $2 million water bill, it'll make your blood pressure go high. Or if it makes it, or if you're trying to pay your water bill and they're not cashing your check and then it's not showing up over, it's going to make your blood pressure go up. So I think we're going to get that solved here shortly, because Arlington will have the software program to notice flag those things, flag you when you have a leak in your water. I think we'll get the billing problems solved very shortly.
So you might not be aware, there's another billing issue that's going around, and it's not just me, and I'll share my experience as a demonstrative, but
and by the way, you never liked Fathom, I remember.
Yeah, I never liked Fathom. I was excited about this, but so far not so excited. But even as this morning, I talked to Councilman Altum, and he even got 3 phone calls on the recent bill about something similar that's happened to me, which was we got our meters changed in June. Our July bill came, and it was triple what we normally would take in our household. And looking at it, it said that we did 1,600 gallons a day, every day. So, oh my God, we have a main leak somewhere. We called a master plumber. No, everything's good. We reached out to the billing company. The billing company said reach out to Arlington. So we did. We reached out to Arlington. They came out and had somebody test the lines. Arlington came back, said the meter's fine. Right after that, our billing went back to normal. You could start seeing it come down from the half a month before, and then the following month was back to normal. And I'm kind of left here with $1,000 bill that I don't think half of that is what I should owe right now. And the problem I'm running into is it's been 3-4 months of me trying to deal with this because I'm dealing with the billing entity, I'm dealing with the Arlington entity, and the city government who's literally pointing at the other two and saying, this is where it's at. And so I know a lot of people always are also having similar bills where all of a sudden it's $400 or $500 right after we get these meters. And I just don't think anybody's kind of thinking that there's a problem here more than
I always think there's a problem, but I'm also going to say that our reports that's a small percentage.
Sure.
It's about 1%. And so I'm not going to jump to conclusions and say there's a major problem. Obviously there is a problem and that we have to get it solved. And in your case, I would go talk to Lakita, but I've been reading some of these. I get a report and some of them we're finding that there's a problem and we'll fix them. And some of them were, some people, their check bounced and they get billed again the next month because they didn't have a check that passed. Some of those things happen, but there are also some legitimate concerns. And so we're trying to work out all those. And by the way, that's not unusual.
Sure.
I've talked to other mayors and they go, yeah, we get some of these billing problems, but I'd like to get them all out of the way so that people can be reliably certain what their bill is going to be, because you've got to budget on a monthly basis like I do. Mm-hmm. And so, but I'll certainly touch base with Lakita.
Well, I promised Gail, who's one of our readers, that I would ask this question, and it's been obviously hitting home with us. We don't do 1,600 gallons of usage a day.
I do think they responded to Gail. I do. Lakita did, and explained what the issue was.
Sure.
And by the way, hi Gail, if you're watching. Miss Cliff.
But I think probably the biggest issue, and it's nobody's fault because Fathom dropped us and the way they dropped us, and we're trying to fix it and get it more. But it is back to the too many chefs in the kitchen and everybody's pointing to each other. I think that's what's frustrating to all of us right now.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I don't think muni billing has been receptive. I've had some friends that have just get frustrated with muni billing.
I mean, besides that, they didn't call me back like they said. They were nice, but they did say, hey, the city will credit us if we get sprinkler repair guys and master, and that didn't happen. Not saying that could have been an empty promise on their part, not a city thing, but that's my only complaint was they didn't follow up, which made it more time. When I finally followed up, it was like, oh yeah, well, here's what you need to do, talk to Lakita. And so it is kind of like a disconnection, or, to me, it's the city cares about us. Arlington's not really going to care about us. They're going to care about the city. The billing company's not going to care about us. They're going to care about the city, but the city should care about the citizens.
They do, and you're right.
Okay, so that was the water. I promised I would hit that for Gail. Let's talk about the racetrack, because I actually got, and I know a few other the leaders around town got contacted by an individual about wanting to reopen the strip track, and they're going through the process of why and why not. So over the years, and I've been kind of involved with that area since just after the TIF, I think is where I came in the picture. But it seems like the story keeps changing about the area. So your living memory is pretty long on this, and I just wanted to set the story straight from the beginning of how the TIF was introduced, the relationship between the city and the racetracks, and just moving forward with it, the whole area.
Well, with the racetracks, most of them have a long history here, or the other two did. The last one that's operating now has only been around since around 2001. It was built by Ronnie Now, a former council member. Mm-hmm. And I think I saw, it was somebody at the budget meeting, it might have been Richard Weber or somebody, saying you shouldn't have closed the racetracks. We didn't close the racetracks. We didn't close Cowtown. Cowtown closed because of they were not up to code to electrical and stuff like that. And spending $75,000, I think, from what I understand, was not going to be a good business decision. knowing how the city had felt about the racetracks in the past. And then with the drag strip said, we'd like to redevelop this land and get out of this business. We didn't force them out. They signed a development agreement. And I do know right now there are several developers who would like to build houses there. And so the question becomes really, what is in the best interest of the city? Is it, and this is, this is anybody's individual opinion. Is it better to have houses down there or racetracks? And I hear the story that the racetracks bring in all this revenue, but I hear that is more apocryphal, really. And our studies show that they don't bring in a lot of revenue, but they are part of Kennedale's history, and they are landowners. And in the United States, as I remember, private property is still sacrosanct, right? And you don't tell people what to do.
Absolutely.
And so we haven't closed any of the racetracks. And I know that there was open the drag strip, but it's now a non-conforming use. That would have to go to the BOA, not the council. The BOA would have to look at what the comprehensive plan developed by citizens would see, and was it inconsistent with the comprehensive plan? And the BOA would have to make that decision. And as a BOA chair that you're a semi-judicial body, yes. Right? And so we as the council, I can't tell the BOA what to do. So it's out of our hands.
Especially their chairman, right?
That's right.
Kind of hard to tell me what to do.
Right, trying to tell you what to do. And of course, right now, you can't make a statement on it because you might have a case in front of you at some point, right? And so I've always told that to BOA members. I said, be careful what you say on social media, because you might have a case in front of you someday and you may have to disqualify yourself. But so with the racetracks, it's a question of where do you see the future of Kennedale and where do you see the revenue coming from? Is the city financially sustainable with the racetracks operating, or is it more sustainable with a housing development going in there? Because you put in, say, 200 houses, you're going to develop a lot more property taxes, and you're going to have people coming in the town center. Racetracks will bring in businesses on weekend, bring in business on weekend and during racing season. It just depends. That goes back to the citizens. My job is to make sure that we accomplish the comprehensive plan developed by citizens. I've been out to the racetracks. I know the McMillans. I know Dave McMillan, really nice guy. I know Ronnie now, who's built the racetrack. I know my good friend Phil Wallace, who's a big race fan. But it's an iffy thing. I mean, you've got some of the city that wants those tracks, and you've got newer residents who don't like those tracks. And when people tell me, well, you should have known that beforehand, they were here longer. It's a democracy. It just depends on how people vote. That's the big difference. If a lot of people decide they don't want them, they're going to elect candidates that don't want them. Or if they really want them, they're going to elect candidates that want them. Sure. But as far as I know, we have not, and I think you can ask other council members, we have not talked about the racetracks in 4 years, maybe 5 years. And that's my mom in the background who's interrupting me for some reason.
Sure people are hearing my kids upstairs yelling right now through the mic. I'll know later with my editor, but 2020 Zoom meetings.
Yeah, 2020 Zoom meetings. So that's the racetrack. I mean, it's that would be a BOA decision, but I do know that we have developers coming in looking to build there now, with the other track still in existence.
Sure.
And
somebody who's like, I've never been on P&Z, but with being on the BOA and the BBB for a decade, you kind of have to learn P&Z to kind of be effective.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You've got to know what the P&Z's thinking, because sure. You may have to grant a variance. And so you have to know what they're thinking.
Yeah. And we're actually the group, and over the last decade, they're pretty strict about their exceptions and the rules. Like it has to be really unique. And but one of the things that I've learned is, even when you do develop an area with, say, with housing, like you're talking about, the assumption too that there will be like a little office space or something where there might be a cleaners or a little mini mart or something in those areas, those little satellite
Right.
places as well.
That's exactly right. That's what you call a neighborhood village, where you'd have a place where people could walk to, like you said, a dry cleaners or a little coffee shop, right? That walkability factor. There's actually a book called The Walkable City or Suburban Nation that addresses both of those kind of concepts. And you see a lot of cities trying to move to that, where people can walk and have some sort of interaction. And so when you look at that sort of stuff, and things change, and people worry about, well, what kind of houses you're going to build. Tastes change. What young people want today in a house is maybe different than what I wanted when I was in a house. You know, in the 1950s, the average house size for a family of 5 was 900 square feet.
Oh my God.
Right. And now you have families
That was our old house, basically.
right. And that was a typical house in the 1950s. Yeah. Now we're talking about in 2020, the average house size around 2,700 square feet with a family of about 3.
I mean, I have to say that we bought a bigger house this year.
Right.
If we didn't have this house before COVID, I would have probably 4 less kids for sure.
But when you look at housing development, I mean, some of it's what the market demands, you know, and so when you're trying to approve it, you're trying to follow what the market's asking for.
I think that's a good segue. Like what's being developed in this area and all of DFW, I think a lot of people need to understand too that this is pretty staple right now. Are those kind of mini plots kind of thing, or retirement communities, which is
right.
kind of the things that are going up. And that's a different demographic than what's been around here. Just to kind of segue off of that into development, these are the kind of developments that we're working on right now. And where are we at? Because it was a big fight 2 years ago, but the office space slash retail slash affordable housing apartments that was supposed to be on the main parkway.
You're over there. Well, right now, last we've been left at is that one, TxDOT only allows a certain amount of cuts into the highway.
Yep.
And they're not going to allow another cut unless we close off another part of the highway in terms of a cut. And I think everybody would understand that somewhere Sublet Road needs to be fixed, right? It's now we talk about Sublet a lot. This is the other side of Sublet where it curves around the cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somehow you're going to have to straighten that out. And that's going to be, I mean, this project is primarily been delayed by trying to find a way to meet TxDOT's demands so that we don't have too many cuts into the highway. And it's one of the things we are working on. I met with Michael Morris, the head of the Regional Transportation Coalition, which they dole out the money essentially, and he's one of the big wigs in the country on transportation, and he's helping us with a complete streets project to make that street more friendly. And you look at those roads along that street, and they angle in at bad angles, right? If you're coming off Sublet or you're coming off Mansfield Cardinal, those are bad angles. You want 90 degrees, and so we're looking at ways, and that's critical to that development, is finding a way to get a road that would connect to it. And that's where we're at.
So are they still planning to do the retail space? Because that was a rumor that was going on. Okay.
Yes.
Now, so I guess let me just ask the question. When they come before council and say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a retail space and this office space. Are they allowed to say, well, we're just not going to do the retail space more and just the office space after
it depends on how you zone it, right? Once you, for example, if you zone something, say R3, well, they don't have to build R3. They can build R2. They can build R1.
Yeah.
And so unless you're doing a planned development, then yeah, you can set out the conditions of what you're going to do in a PD. So yeah, they will build the retail portion of it. But I mean, it's a tough time for builders right now.
Yeah.
So
it is.
you know,
and a busy time at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like a weird perfect storm for development if people don't realize what's going on. There's a lot of people moving here. Building never really stopped during COVID. It still went in the DFW area, even in Dallas County, believe it or not. But there's that hiccup there now where, and this is happening in my wife's work. She's a clerk for the county. Everything's caught up until March when we shut down. And now there's that little hiccup here of people who just paused. The courts paused. new development pause, just a lot of things pause. And so there is this weird scenario where there's still not enough builders and not enough plumbers and things like that, but there's a little hiccup in development.
Well, and I think that, the other issue that you face in Kennedale is that you've got a lot of weird shapes of parcels of land, right?
Sure.
Narrow parcels of land. And so you have to balance out, let's say you own one of those parcels of land and somebody says, look, I want to build houses on it and I'll pay you $2 million for this. Well, that person's thinking, I can take care of my kids, my grandkids for the rest of their life. But you have to balance that out with what kind of needs of the citizens are, what they want to see of their community. And so you're balancing out, the idea of the ownership of private property and the free market and capitalism with the needs of the community. And sometimes those clash and become contentious.
Okay, well, I mean, I could talk to you all day, Brian. I always find you very fascinating, and full of knowledge. I've learned a lot from you over the years too. I just
Oh, well,
wanted to let
thanks.
you know. And yeah, I remember the first time. I don't think I've ever told you this. When you first got in council, I didn't like you. So, and you grew on me over the years. I know you have several relationships like that too. Joe Taylor being one of them. I can go ahead and call him out on that. So, but
Phil Mull's another one, and I count Phil as one of my good friends.
yeah, Phil
And
his
John
little
Clark, by the way.
yes,
John
John
Clark was
too.
one of those people.
Yeah. But final thoughts for you. You're running election. I'll give you, every time you need. Plug
Well,
yourself.
I don't have a lot to say because my mom's telling me that spaghetti dinner's ready. But I will tell you, go vote. I don't care if you vote for whoever you want to vote for, but the elections are important. This is political science, Brian, talking now. That in Texas, we rank at the bottom of presidential voting. We rank at the bottom in governor voting. We rank low in local elections. Get out and vote, make your voice heard. I know it's a tough time to do so, and I would remind you that you've got a long ballot ahead of you because of this November election, and please get to the end of the ballot. There's important races at the end of the ballot for county elections, my election, council elections, school board elections. Get down to the end of that ballot, make your voice heard, because that's how this democracy works, and only works if you participate in it. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
And as you said, as when people watching this, early voting would already be going for a couple of days now. You can also go to Kennedale News website to get more information on early voting, which links us over to the Tarrant County elections website as well. We also have a sample ballot on our Facebook wall right now. If you just scroll down to Monday evening, you'll see a link to not only download 76060 sample ballot, but KISD Arlington residents, your sample ballot as well is there. So make sure, remember, you can't bring your cell phone. You can bring a piece of paper. You can bring the ballot, for example, but you can't bring your cell phone when you go and vote. And it is super important to participate. And Brian could back me on this. Even national numbers compared to other countries, our numbers don't even compare. I believe Spain's at 95% participation, where the United States is 50 to 60, depending on our president.
We're actually at about 53%. We're less than almost every other industrialized democracy in the world.
And that's mind-boggling that we're the bastion of that, and we don't participate. And that's been a big important thing for me, is go out and vote.
All right.
And I appreciate you, Mayor Johnson, for showing up to my show and answering these questions. And I appreciate everybody else in the audience, and tune in more next time. We'll have another KISD Place 7 coming out tomorrow, so stay tuned.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Jeff, and we'll see you around.
And one more final thing from all of us in Kennedale. Our hearts go out to you and your loss of your father. We've been praying for you. I always say that you're not really a man until you don't have a father to go to advice for. So
I miss him every day. I'll tell you that.
I know you guys were really close. So I know a lot of people were praying for you.
Oh, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.